All right, my beauties. We are going to here quickly talk about triggers. Now, I will assume that everybody who's here knows exactly what I mean when I say trigger, but it's a really important thing to add it here to kind of round up the whole conversation we're having around emotional literacy, frequency literacy. So, we talked about the emotional baseline in the previous video. This one's going to be quite a lot shorter. And this is because most people they don't consider the emotional baseline. So triggers are honestly considered like kind of like the holy grail of shadow work in the sense that every form of shadow work you're going to be doing is going to be dealing with triggers. Most people thus know what triggers are, whereas a lot of people don't actually think about the emotional baseline. But for us to truly be able to read our frequency, we need both. So if we think about what the emotional baseline is, I want you to think about I think the way I think about people, the way I think about myself, the way I think about a collective is I think about frequency grids, frequency fields and frequency grids. It's like frequency architecture. And really, this architecture determines how the energy flows, right? And for any system, any complex system, that being a human being, because you're a complex system, right? Your whole body, just the physical part of you is a complex system. Then there's the whole mental, emotional part, all of this. It's very complicated. It has multiple building blocks. But similarly, we can talk about an ecosystem, right? Or we can talk about a single chemical equation, right? A simple reaction we may look at in our world, in a lab. We are always looking at an equilibrium. We are looking at the transfer of energy that allows that system to be stable. The only time a system can have longevity is when it is stable, meaning that the energy flow within it is somewhat balanced, okay? Somewhat balanced. And then that system can go on and perform under specific conditions over a longer period of time and exist within it. That's the same thing when it comes to your frequency. So, your emotional baseline is really showing how you stabilized your energy field under specific conditions. The reason why it's so important for us to look at emotional baseline is that always remember it's relational. We are relational beings. So the way we establish our baseline is in relation to the conditions in our world. So we learn what is safe, what is okay, what is possible for us based on the environment. Now, the problem with today's world is that our environment and our values at the collective, so within the system, most of us here, most of the people who work with me are Westerners. So our system and most of the developed world is largely built on the values of capitalism, hyper individualism, productivity. Your value is determined by how much work you do, yada yada yada. Most people who come to me are overachievers. They were praised for working, doing a lot, right? So the system we're within, remember, you stabilized your identity, your frequency architecture within these conditions, right? These conditions, these systems don't care about you necessarily thriving. They don't care about you becoming the most exalted, the most fulfilled version of yourself. They care about you stabilizing in a way where you can serve the cogs, the machinery, right? I'm just going to say it as it is. This is the truth, right? So, what we see here is that most people, as long as they can show up and contribute to the system, so show up to work, not disturb the status quo in society, their baseline is considered good. It doesn't matter if you're depressed. As long as you're not depressed enough that you cannot show up for work, no one gives a shit. Like, that's the reality, right? Same goes with anxiety. Most of the time, if we look at how we treat, how even conventional therapy is designed to treat mental health conditions, is helping you normalize yourself to a point where you can participate in a day-to-day life without too many issues. I have quite a few friends who went and studied therapy and exited the system because of this, because they said, I was taught to basically treat people in a way that they can become functional members of a society. But then we need to have a conversation. Is the current society built in a way where we want to be functioning members of that society? For most of us, the answer would be no. Anyway, the important thing is that I want you to understand that this is why I speak about the emotional baseline so much, because we can have people here, and we're going to have a lot of people here whose nervous system baseline is not parasympathetic, mostly relaxation response that deviates from that only when it's appropriate, right? Because your nervous system should, of course, go into fight flight if there's actual danger present in your 3D environment. But most of us learned to function and function potentially very well given the demands and expectations of the society and our environment with a shutdown nervous system response, chronic freeze, chronic fight flight, etc. And here it's very important that we recognize this because we want to start moving into this relaxed, regulated, soft space, and we want to emotionally start moving towards the baseline of equanimity, of inner peace, of satisfaction, and into elevated emotions where we experience joy and gratitude in this elated feeling of truly being alive on a more and more and more regular basis. And we want to spend the bulk of our time in those states. We're talking 80+% of our time. Ideally, we want spent there rather than in this fight, flight, freeze, fawn, shutdown baseline that so many of us have normalized. Okay, so this is how I want you to think about the baseline. I want you to think of the conditions, the way you stabilize your nervous system, your frequency field, your emotional baseline, given the conditions. And just because it's stable, it doesn't mean it's serving you. Okay, now triggers, however, are moments when this identity gets perturbed. It's like a little dagger, is like a little, I wanted to say explosions. Probably not a good thing to say. I'm recording this just a few days after, the US attacked Iran 2026. So my mind is obviously going into all those places. But it's like something perturbs the system, right? And triggers they're like, when they happen, they're really uncomfortable. But I want you to really start thinking about the fact that triggers are one of the best things that can happen to you because they expose the fallacy. They expose where your identity is unstable, where your emotional baseline is unstable. And as such, they are direct portals into a subconscious belief. So remember how earlier on we talked about, right, how the way your subconscious mind works is that there is this architecture underlying it, and this is directly connected to your nervous system. And when these beliefs get triggered, it evokes a nervous system response, fight, flight, freeze. We're going to go in depth into nervous system responses in the next module. So a trigger is directly exposing that. Now, there are two ways people go about dealing with their triggers. The vast majority of people who are not well versed in inner work will normalize the trigger, rationalize it, create a story around why they are right, why it makes sense for them to have got mad, why they should be upset about someone why it is a logical, reasonable response when someone cuts you off on the road that you lose your shit. And this is, if you remember, we talked about how emotions and thoughts come from the subconscious belief, and the thought will defend the identity. So these people will rationalize why this happened. They will create a story around it, okay? And they will basically use that story not to have to take responsibility for their feelings, emotions, thoughts, actions, behaviors, right? I would argue that is the vast majority of people on this planet, and you should be aware of that because there's not really any point. You can't do much, with those people who are not willing to do this. Now, the other option, this one's a little bit more subtle, and we don't want to be doing this either, is people who and pay attention to that if you are that person. If you are this person and you need any additional guidance around it, bring it to a Q&A. A lot of people then, if they were, for example, learning about the, trauma, nervous system, like all of these things, they may have a good idea around what the reason is, what the root cause is of what created the trigger. But they go into a story, they go into her head, they may be able to rationalize the whole process from A to B. My mom didn't love me enough when I was a kid, therefore I respond this way in this specific situation, right? But they will not feel. And remember that the frequency is experienced through feeling. If you want to become fluent, not just in frequency literacy, but you want to get quick in frequency transmutation, You need to learn to feel. It's about coming back to the body, because this is where our nervous system actually gives us a response. And we need to start learning to work with these difficult emotions, to sit with our anger, to let it flow through us, to sit with our disappointment, sit with our jealousy, sit with all of these emotions and actually feel them in our body, so that the energy can, it's like the energy opens up, it moves through us, and eventually it processes. And you will see when you're sitting with heavy emotions, most of the time, a difficult emotion, when you truly let it flow through you, it doesn't take longer than 60 to 90 seconds and it moves through you. And then there's a pause. There may be another wave, but you're not going to be, if you're actually expressing an emotion, you're not going to be in the thick of that emotion for longer than 60 to 90 seconds at a time. Because some people have this fear that if they truly allow themselves to feel the emotion, it won't stop. They will get overwhelmed, they will get consumed. These can be, by the way, ancestral fears. So I've seen a lot when I worked with my mother's lineage, with my great grandmother, who lost most of her family in World War II. And then she was left alone, taking care of the farm, taking care of many children. She had this fear that if she lies down, she allows herself to feel, she will never get up again and she will never recover, because there was so much work to be done. And then these people existed, destabilized, this perpetual shutdown. Okay, so I want you, when triggers happen, you will see, right? There are two ways. Like sometimes you will have an opportunity when the trigger happens to immediately excuse yourself, take time out, and work with it. And we're going to go deeper into how to work with triggers in the next chapter when we work with EFT. Sometimes there won't be a possibility. Sometimes you will have to compartmentalize and be like, now is not a time to deal with this trigger, right? And you will set the time aside later on to actually look at it and work with it, okay? But the important thing at this stage that I want you to really start noticing is when you're getting triggered. So the first step, and what we're doing in this first part of frequency literacy, is that you're getting to understand how to actually read frequency, and you're cultivating awareness of your emotional baseline. Really, really important. Understanding what is your go-to. And as we go into nervous system responses in a little bit, this will become, you will have even more language to apply to it. And then the second one is that I want you to start getting really mindful and observant of when you are getting triggered. When there are these moments of like, ooh. And depending on where you are on your journey, depending on your nervous system state, normally what I've seen with myself and others is that, first of all, it will differ depending on how strongly you experience emotions. So I'm someone who experiences emotions extremely strongly. I have very, very strong emotions. I have emotional authority in human design. For those of you who know about this, I have the most extreme of the waves that goes between extreme highs and lows. And when I am in these extreme lows, I am emotionally incapacitated. There's no point in me doing the work. Like I might as well, I can drop everything, and the best thing for me is just like to move and to do something else with my energy. I literally cannot function in that emotional low because those emotions are so incredibly intense. They will maybe come like once a month, not much more than that, but when they come, they are extremely powerful. Some people have emotions that are less intense than that. That's totally fine. We are all unique. But the important thing is that oftentimes earlier on, when you haven't done that much work, you will be getting triggered a lot more often. And I want you to start paying attention to what are the emotions that normally get triggered. Because as we go into nervous system responses, you will see, right, that most of us have our preferred way of experiencing default emotion. So some of us will go to anger really quickly. We will get mad. Some of us, it'll be very like explosive, heated anger that's easy to see. And will be like, ugh. You will get like this hot energy up in your head. Like it will just feel very intense. Some people, it's a lot more subtle. It may be grudges or resentment. It may be burning like much colder. And it may even be this like cold rage. It lives in different parts of the body. So anger, the way I think about it, anger normally will start here in like solar plexus, right? And then it'll go up into your head. And when you're really angry, when it's this heated rage, it can completely blind you, right? This is why we say you're blind with rage. Like your brain just shuts the fuck off. Like you don't know what you're doing. Cold rage is different. It lives in different part of the body. It is still like here, but it goes lower down and as well like in the head, but it's like it's almost like it moves back here, right? It's a different energy and you can still think about it. So this is more when, someone may resort to like passive aggressive comments or even plotting, right? Like this vengeful, but like cold, calculated way of doing things. Some of you, the default may be disappointment. You get triggered, you're like, ah. Some of you, it may be this feeling of rejection and pulling back and being really guarded, right? So each of us has different predominant triggers. You may get permutations of them depending on the situation. But I'm saying this because it will look differently for all of us. Because some people, when they get triggered, they will get really heated, really angry. And then some other people, when they get triggered, it will look very different. They may just really like pull back. They may get really shut down. They may get really quiet. They may get really guarded. They may stop speaking. They may actually withdraw themselves back in and put a shell around them. And all of these are triggers. So if we divide, if we're thinking about the emotional frequency scale, right? Triggers are really anywhere in the lower half when we start going into resentment, rejection, regret, doubt, disbelief, fear, anger, jealousy, apathy. That would be more of a state than a trigger. Any sort of shutdown response, shame, guilt, etc. So all of the things that in theta healing we call vices, you will get triggered into those. And when those emotions surface, there's nothing wrong with them, right? We don't want to go into spiritual bypassing, which is what people do, that is like, oh, I shouldn't feel anger or whatever bullshit there is. We want to notice them. We want to be aware of them. We don't want to bullshit ourselves that we're not getting triggered. Like some people are obviously getting triggered and they're like, oh, I'm not getting triggered. Like, yeah, you are. We need to start clocking that so that then we can use it as a gateway into our subconscious. So you want to start noticing when these things are happening. That's the first most important thing when you're getting triggered. The more you observe, the more you will start understanding what are the things that are triggering you most often, right? And then the last thing we really need at this stage is us starting to take responsibility. So understanding that when we get triggered, it's not another person's fault. Now, that doesn't mean, by the way, that doesn't mean we don't set boundaries. That doesn't mean we don't have discernment. That doesn't mean we don't tell people to fuck right off if they're interfering or they're crossing a boundary, if they're invading our space, if they're doing anything where we feel really uncomfortable. Like, it doesn't mean we don't do this, right? Because some people think that if they take people think that taking responsibility for your feelings means that you allow people outside of you to do whatever the fuck they want to. That is not what I'm saying. You can have responsibility for your feelings and discernment, responsibility and accountability, and knowing that your feelings, your triggers are your own problem, no one else's, and have boundaries and have very, very clear communication around what is and isn't acceptable. That being said, I deeply believe that we co-create everything in our reality. And I mean everything. I mean absolutely everything, which can be a very triggering thing to address. But that also means that if we are attracting situations where people are attacking us, where people are not seeing us, where people are rejecting us, we are attracting that energy into our space because there is a matching vibration in our field. And we need to integrate the lesson that's there in order to release that and stop attracting this continuous energy. And I have seen this so many times with my clients in personal relationships, that when we address these triggers and these frequencies, people in their lives change. But most importantly, most fascinatingly, people who already are in their lives start treating them differently. And this is because we emit a different frequency and we sometimes stop obligating people to treat us in a certain way. So this is why I want you to start approaching this from the perspective of always, you can set a boundary, you can tell the person to fuck off. I have no problem with that. But to take responsibility for what's happening and to take that trigger with yourself into your practice. We're going to be doing this later with tapping, and start resolving them and start understanding what is the frequency, what is the belief, what is the emotion, and what is the unmet need that is at the bottom of this trigger, because then you're working at the root cause of your reality. And when you start resolving that, everything that you do, everything in your reality, your relationships, money, all of this is going to start to change. Before we wrap up, the last thing I want to say is that as you progress on your path, triggers may get more and more subtle. The more you regulate your nervous system, the more you clear the beliefs, the fewer triggers you will experience, and the more and more subtle they will become. Because first, what you will notice is the most intense experiences, and those are the ones you should always work with first. The first things you should always work with is the things that triggers you the strongest and that have the most profound nervous system response. But as you continue on your path, two things will happen. The first one is you will be encountering new experiences that may trigger things that weren't triggered before. And secondly, triggers may become more and more subtle. So they may no longer evoke this massive response that perhaps you were experiencing earlier on, if this is the way you experience emotion. Again, we are all different, but they may be smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'm saying this because it takes a new level of subtlety and refinement. So the more that we clear the, if we think from frequency to matter, we are working from the more subtle material. Frequency subtle is light to gross, dense material, right? So this is a polarity scale from very subtle to gross. And this is why we talk about density, right? In spirituality, certain energies have more density, and these lower frequency emotions, they have more density because they move more slowly, right? Matter, remember, is just energy, that light that has been slowed down. So the more we clear these denser emotions, the more we're moving into the realm of the subtle. Right? That's the same as like, same thing happens with food. If you're used to be eating a lot of processed food, a lot of additives with a lot of salt, with a lot of really intense sugar, etc., you may take something like dark chocolate and the only thing you're going to feel is bitter because you're so accustomed to salt, or maybe food to sugar, or maybe food that doesn't have much seasoning or much salt will taste completely bland. But maybe if you detoxify your body, and as you start calibrating your palate to less additives, less strong flavor, the more you will appreciate natural, more subtle, more complex flavors, right? And it's the same here. So equally, your nervous system experience and your frequency experience will become more subtle. You will be able to perceive more. You will be able to get more subtle, more refined in your perception. You will be able to sense smaller deviations, but it's important to be developing this subtlety so that we don't get into the whole ego game when people are there like, I'm not getting triggered anymore. Like, I am healed. And this is just a subconscious sabotage mechanism that slows our growth because we tell ourselves we've done all the work we had to do. But it is going to look different. So depending on where you are on the spectrum, you may be here, you may be experiencing a lot of intense emotions, you may be experiencing a lot of these heavy emotions on a regular basis, then you're going to be working with whatever is coming up now, and it's going to be very easy to find events to work with. But maybe you've done a lot of work already, you're much more on this side of the spectrum, and then your job is to be noticing smaller and smaller deviations. Instead of maybe going into the whole like, oh, this feels really off, you're going to be kind of like, there's something not quite right here. This conversation made me feel a little bit off. Like, it didn't send me spiraling, but there was a little bit of like a tug maybe in my gut, or it was something didn't feel right. Like, why did it not feel right? And then here we're having, you work with a trigger, you work with discernment, and you're getting into a deeper and deeper and deeper understanding of what is a yes and what is a no for you. So this is a very beautiful process that is going to bring you much more in touch with your body, with your yes, with your no, what you desire, what you don't desire, what you're available for, what you're not available for, what is okay in the relationships, what's not okay in your relationships, what is okay in your business, what is not okay in your business. And it's just this beautiful attunement to more and more subtle levels of vibration as you clear more and more density from your field. So I want you this week to upgrade what we worked on. So last week we looked a lot more at the baseline, the emotional baseline. And now I want you to start looking at triggers. And I want you, the best thing you can do is to keep a little journal, to do a little journal at the end of the day where you go over your day and you take note of what were the events that triggered you. I'm intentionally not just doing this with business because I think I said this before in the earlier video. Your business is tied to everything else. So things that trigger you in your personal relationship with someone else are going to have the same root cause as a lot of things that are going to be triggering or causing you issue in your business. So I want you to be observing triggers that are happening across the board throughout your day and take note of them. And I want you to take note of what triggered you. I want you to write down the situation, and I want you to write down what is the emotion you felt. So I want you to start getting really in touch with, like, what is it that I feel right now? And I want you to name it. Precise naming is not as important. If you cannot give it a specific, I'd say give it a label. Is it disappointment? Is it anger? Is it frustration? Is it a mixture of three of them? Give it a name, but you can also, and I would highly recommend doing this for the future work we're going to do together. Write down where it is in your body if you feel into it. Is it in your stomach? Is it in your sacral area? Is it in your chest? Is it in your throat? Give it a shape. Is it rectangular? Is it a sphere? Then give it size. Is it big? Is it small? Is it the size of a marble? Is it the size of a golf ball? Is it the size of a basketball? And give it texture. Texture and density. Is it dense and hard? Is it porous? Is it maybe like a sponge? Is it maybe sharp and spiky? And also give it temperature, cold, hot. So we want to, and this is, you see how we're moving beyond emotion and we're starting to now just read frequency as it manifests in your body. What is the size? What is the shape? What is the color? What is the temperature? All of this. And then we're starting to connect this to an emotion. And then when we move on to working with actual EFT, you're going to start being able to utilize all of the things you're practicing now to start moving and releasing and integrating this emotion and liberating your nervous system from past imprints that are getting triggered in the present moment.